Good evening, everybody. I like the planners here, using ice cream as a strategy to get you here to hear about mission work. Brilliant. It's really a pleasure to be here. I think my journey with COS began back in 2009, if I'm remembering the day. I was a grant recipient. I begged Wills to let me come to the COS because I wanted to be a missionary ophthalmologist. But it was at the worst time for residents. You know, you got your first years coming in. They want the upper levels there to help through the summer. And I was like, please, let me go. And so I believe it was 2009 was my first trip to COS. And what a blessing this group has been to me over many years. At that time, I was able to share my own struggles, going through internship, going through a deep depression. And God's just used this group through different trials and tribulations in my life over those times. And it's a pleasure to be up here tonight as the next partner with COS. So Jono and I actually had a similar transition at a similar time. And so we were part of a group with two other families originally that had been living life in a lot of ways communally since 2007. But in 2021, God, through a series of difficult things, was leading us on. So I resonated significantly with Jono, and we even talked during those times about what we were going through. And yeah, there was a lot of loss and mourning. But God gave me Psalm 16 during that time. And verse 5 says, "The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup." And so, we just have to choose. We're all in with the Lord, right? And he gets to choose how he's going to use us, what he's going to let us experience. And sometimes that's not always easy. Just like Jesus had to drink the cup and suffer. So God took us on a journey, as you heard, from Tenwick to Burundi, and leaving Burundi was really difficult. But that led into verse 6. And so David said, "The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance." And part of that beautiful inheritance for me is my family. So these are my kids, Jessica and our kids. My kids have grown up in Africa since Elise, I think, was 2 when we moved to Tenwick. Sam wasn't even born yet. So this has been their experience, and it's been a beautiful thing to be able to raise a family in Africa, a great gift. And then the psalm ends and says, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." So when we follow Jesus, one, it's just going to be an adventure. But two, we get life, we get joy, and pleasure. And these things are true. It's like the pearl of great price. The kingdom of God is amazing. And it's a real honor to get to be a small part of it. So part of leaving Burundi was I wasn't able to fully go after the calling I felt God had put on my life to really try to impact eye care in Africa on a larger scale. And so we made the very difficult decision that God was calling us to move on. We went back to the States for a year. And during that time, we did have a time of mourning. We took 4 months to process what had happened to us before we started looking forward to what God had next. But as we started moving into that and asking God, what is your calling for us? We can go to the next slide. Am I in control? There we go. All right. So God really put on our hearts that we needed to be about training, mentorship, and equipping. And so Jessica and I proposed a project to our mission, Surge. And so we, in 2022, launched the I Love Africa project at our mission. And our mission was to empower African eye care professionals to be the hands and feet of Jesus for the blind. And our first task was to look where could we be most effective in training. And so we were specifically looking for an eye institute that was independent and could really be visionary. We can go to the next slide. And was going to be training. So God led us to the Rwanda International Institute of Ophthalmology, which is a mouthful, for sure. So we just call it RIO. So RIO is a residency program. It's a nonprofit started by two African ophthalmologists. I'll tell a little bit of their story because it's quite inspiring. So John Nurikiye is a Rwandan ophthalmologist. His family fled to Burundi, and he grew up in the national park of Burundi in the bush as a refugee. And he became a doctor out of the bush. And then he went and joined Paul Kagame and his forces, who helped end the genocide in Rwanda. He fought in that war. He's a war hero. And so he was one of the very first doctors post-war to get sent off to become a specialist. And after being a trauma doctor for 4 years in a war, he said, I want to do something where they're not going to wake me up at night ever again. And so that's why I chose to become an ophthalmologist. But he went to South Africa to become an ophthalmologist. And when he came back to Rwanda in the early 2000s, he started building eye care in Rwanda. And so for the last 20 plus years, that's been his passion. Now, along that process, he met his future wife, Prof. Chiku Matenge, who came to Rwanda to help, and they fell in love and got married. So Prof. Chiku is a brilliant, brilliant woman. She's one of the first MD, PhD ophthalmologists in Africa. She has big brains. So these two are like these superstars. So John is the current president of COEXA, the College of Ophthalmology of Eastern, Central, and Southern Africa. And Prof. Chiku is the president of the African Council of Ophthalmology for all of Africa. And these two are married to each other. So they too had a dream to really advance training in Africa. And so they launched their own institute to bring that forward. So RIO is a nonprofit. They really started advocating at the level of government to change policy and promote eye care within the government system at the Ministry of Health level. They do the research to back that up. Professor Chiku is involved in developing the rapid assessment of avoidable blindness surveys that are used all over the world to assess countries' need. So she's one of the gurus of that in the world. And so they went to these governments with evidence of what needs to be done in these countries. And then in 2018, they launched the residency program here at RIO. So here's some of our residents at RIO. And so RIO is the very first non-university-based residency program in this part of Africa that we're in. So what is that like? This is what the mission hospitals did. I don't know. When did PAX start? How old is PAX now? 15 years old? 10, 15 years old? More than that. So basically, traditionally the universities are who produce these residents, but it's a long, painful process to go through this, and there's a huge need. So basically, RIO is the first non-university-based program accredited by the College of Ophthalmology rather than under a university. And this is the PAX model that they're doing with COSEXA, the surgery equivalent of COEXA. So anyways, so RIO is a bit of a trailblazer, and now there's many more programs following us in this model. And this will really increase the number of ophthalmologists that can be trained in the region, having this other pathway. So when we look at, we can go to the next slide. When we look at Africa, I do, all right, so I can do that. That's fantastic news. All right, so when we look at Africa, this is a population density map. And you can see, do I even have oh, look at that. So you can see we are based in the Great Lakes region of Africa. So there's Lake Victoria, and then you have these Great Lakes going down the Albertine Rift of Africa, and this is Lake Tanganyika. At the top of that sits Burundi, and above that sits Rwanda. Those are the two most densely populated countries in Africa. And then you can see in eastern Congo, all along eastern Congo, highly populated as well. And so this is kind of the area of focus God's put on my heart. And then you even see Tenwick right over here is in that hot zone right there. And that's why Ben's so busy. So just zooming in on that a little bit. Again, Burundi is sitting here, and then Rwanda is here. And Tenwick would be right about over in here. So we've been in Rwanda now 3 years. And this is the number of trainees and ophthalmologists we've been able to connect with, partly from our time in Burundi, but then via training in Rwanda. So these are kind of the network of ophthalmologists that God's given I Love Africa through Rio. So in Burundi, we helped train the first VR surgeon for Burundi. His name is Jean-Claude. And then fresh from Erevan, Burundi's first oculoplastic surgeon, Dr. Patrick. He just got back at the end of June to Burundi. And then these are other ophthalmologists we're working with. Eric Manarakiza trained at Rio. He graduated. He's now back at Kabuye, the eye unit we worked at in Burundi. And then over the last 3 years, we've been building partnerships all along this edge of Eastern Congo. Just to give you a sense of how big Africa is, Congo here is basically, if I understand correctly, the size of the U.S. east of the Mississippi. So, I mean, this is a massive country. And so we're really focusing on this strip over here, which is the capital, Kinshasa, is clear over here. It's, 1,000+ miles, and that's all rainforest in between. So there's a dearth of eye care in eastern Congo, in much of Congo. And then these are all our graduates now, since we've been in Rwanda, that are serving in Rwanda. And these are all the Rwandans still in training. And then about to graduate is Dr. Rebecca Lusaka, who will go to Tenwick, and Dr. Vincent, who's going to go to Kisi. I know Miles has been to Kisi with Dan Kiage, one of my heroes. So again, they're going to be in that hot zone there. So training. So this is what the training's all about. And it's been really fun just to see God just multiplying our efforts so rapidly through training. The other aspect we talked about is mentorship. So we talk about, teaching people to fish. The next thing I like to say is we got to teach them where to fish, all right? And so that's where mentorship and discipleship comes in, and giving people the heart of Christ to care for the poor and the blind. And so maybe all but 3 of the people on this list have been in Bible study at Jess and I's home, or even virtually now with some of our partners. And we're studying together, what is Jesus' heart for the blind? So that's just a real privilege. So discipleship's a big part of why we're there, and mentorship in the clinic, in the trenches together. So we're gonna now talk about equipping, and we're gonna focus a fair bit of that on Eastern Congo in this next part on equipping. So you can train, you can mentor, and then someone can deploy. And there's so many barriers to them then executing the skills God's given them, right? And, ophthalmology, our fishing pole is kind of expensive. So you can teach them to fish, show them where to fish, but if they don't have a fishing pole, it's going to be tough. So now helping equip these people with the equipment they need. And Jono shared how important that was for him and the last 2 years with him. So these are our partners, people already serving in super high need areas that God's brought into our path with I Love Africa. So I'll highlight a couple. This is Dr. Jason Petua, Kevin Miller, some of you know Kevin Miller. He did PEDS fellowship with Kevin Miller at CCBRT in Dar es Salaam many years ago. He's been faithfully serving in Goma for a decade plus through war, through thick and thin, and his family's there with him. So when I got to Kigali, I'd heard about Jason for a while. I said, please come to Kigali, let's meet, let's talk. And so he came to Kigali, we sat down, and I said, so tell me, how things are going. He's like, it's not easy. And I said, look, how many surgery are you guys putting through your clinic? It's like 150 a year. Like, man, this is the most highly trained ophthalmologist probably in Eastern Congo. And he was like, are you guys doing outreach? He's like, oh man, we'd love to, but there's so many blind people. If we go find them, we can't take care of them because we don't have any funding. If they make it to our clinic, we'll take care of them for free, but we can't afford to go find them. It's like, what are we going to do? Go find them and tell them we can't do their surgery? So we started partnering with him. And just in the last 3 years, his numbers have gone up by a factor of 10. So this year, he and his network of clinics will do over 2,000 surgeries. So that's Jason. And we need to get him safe anesthesia. So I went and visited him, and he wanted me to do some complex PEDS cases with him, congenital glaucoma and stuff. So, he's the only pediatric ophthalmologist in a large area. He serves in a city of 2 million people, and he's the only trained ophthalmologist who can do cataract surgery, for example. So basically, these kids were being intubated, and then they just had an ambu bag and a pulse ox. No suction, nothing else. I was like, all right. The technician was very good. Everything went very smoothly, but it was frightening. Lots of infrastructure work there to be done. So that's just one example. So Jason is a second generation, basically missionary ophthalmologist. His dad and his uncle were basically optometrists trained in mission hospitals on the job. And then they caught a vision to start their own Christian NGO to try to build a network of eye clinics in Eastern Congo. And so they now have a clinic in Goma, which is their main site. They have a clinic in Bukavu, which is another major city in Eastern Congo, and in Bunia in the north. So they're doing a lot of amazing work. So Jason this year, we got a grant through Cure Blindness to do 4,000 cataracts between Jason and our other partners. And in January, right after we got the grant, Goma fell to rebels. And so we're like, all right, we just got this huge grant, God. How are we supposed to do this? And I'm like, Jason, should I try to look for partners somewhere else to offload your cataracts? And he's like, just wait. So there was 3 days of intense fighting. Jason and his family were huddled in their home, keeping their heads low, literally, as bullets and grenades and everything went off. And as the fighting starts to simmer down after 3 days, he's like, I have no idea, do I need to leave? My clinic's probably not going to have any patients. And the day after, the clinic calls him and is like, you coming to work? Because we got a big line of patients waiting for it. And he's like, what? How are there possibly patients waiting for me? But patients just started crossing the front line to get to his clinic. And he's got a cataract finder who's out on the other side of the line finding patients. He's got connections. He'll transport them across into Goma. And so he's staying super busy. It's amazing. These guys are real heroes. So that's Jason. I'm going to tell you the story of Tony. So this is Tony, right here, Tony Mugisha. Tony helped me start the eye clinic in Burundi. So in 2013, we landed in Burundi, started renovating an old warehouse at the hospital, and then Tony joined me as a medical officer right out of medical school. And so within a year and a half or so, we sent him off to residency. At that time, we had to send him to Tanzania. So he was in Dar es Salaam, 3 years of residency, then he came back and joined me. But during that time, we were doing outreach to Congo, and he saw the huge needs there. And so after he paid back his training time, he moved to Congo. And so he moved to Tanganyika province, which is halfway down Lake Tanganyika. Tanganyika province is the size of England, or Florida, however you want to think about it. And there's never been a permanent ophthalmologist there before. And so Tony is there, and he started from scratch. And at first, he was going to buy a cheap Indian microscope with his own savings, because that's all he could afford. And I'm like, don't do that. Let's get you one of Stan's microscopes. So Tony has been beating the snot out of one of Stan's microscopes since 2020. You know, you'll see pictures of what he's done to the microscope. So here it is. Here is Stan's. Here's the epic microscope on the back of a motorcycle in a floodplain. Yeah. So I'm going to share with you. Can we go to the PDF? So this is a report Tony shared with me from an outreach last year that he went on. So the outreach started off with trouble. Lake Tanganyika has been flooding, and so the road to the airport flooded between where he was and the place where he had to get on the small airplane to take him on the outreach. So literally only a 4x4. You know, have you ever seen the 4x4s with the snorkels? You know what I'm talking? This is why they have snorkels. You have to have a diesel engine that can be submerged and get airflow from the snorkel above. So that's the only way he could get to the airport in the first place. So they had to get Land Cruisers with snorkels to get him to the airport. So then they fly out on the outreach in April. They were planning to do one outreach. And so they finally get to the airport and they get out. So they go to a place called Manono. And they get there. And he's just going to tell us a series of stories of patients that I'm going to share with you just to get a taste. So one of the first patients they see is Munga, 54-year-old teacher. He had lost his job because he had gone blind 3 years ago. He had no income. And he traveled 120 kilometers with his wife and his infant to get to the cataract camp. And then he went on to see his child for the first time. There he is with his child. Next patient he tells us about is Kalumba. So Kalumba is an 81-year-old widower. And last time Tony was on outreach in this area, he heard about the outreach. But he lives so far away, by the time he got there, the team was gone. And he had come with his grandson right there. So his grandson had led him many, many miles on foot. They get there, they're gone. So he says to himself, what am I going to do? He says, well, if he came here once, maybe he'll come back someday. He didn't know if he would or not. So he stayed there with his grandson, and they begged on the streets of the town. Guess for how long they begged? Over 2 years. He lived on the streets with his grandson, hoping Tony would come back someday. And this is the day he came back. It's crazy. Next page. So when they get to Manono, 5 people in the hospital, the staff of the hospital, are like blind or partially blind with cataracts at the hospital staff, including the head of the midwives. She's totally blind, and she's worried she's going to lose her meager salary because she can't see anymore. And so he literally did cataract surgery on 5 people, including the head of the midwives at the hospital he's doing the outreach at. Next patient. Oh, so that ended that part of the outreach. So they did, I forget what he said. Yeah. 200-something cataract surgeries in this place, and that was supposed to be the outreach. Then they get word that the airplane can't come. The truck that fuels the airplane is broken down, and so the airstrip no longer has a way to fuel the airplanes. And so they're stuck. They're like they're like in the Congo basin, like along the Congo River, far from home. And there's no roads, like you don't get out of this place. And so they say to themselves, all right, what will we do? I'll just read how he says it. When we were ready to return to Kalemi, that's where they're based, we were informed that we would have to wait indefinitely because there was a logistical problem with the planes. Indeed, the tanker truck that supplies the planes with fuel had broken down, and they are waiting for the spare part. In order not to waste time, we decided to take motorbikes to a mobile clinic in Ankoro. Yeah, that's just a couple 100 kilometers away. All right, so they get to Ankoro, and they just, start up another outreach, no preparation. So this sits right on the west bank of the Congo River. Yeah, it was 120 kilometers from where they were. And they just start, open shop. So the first, one of the first patients they see is Mapanga. They came from 250 kilometers away. He had heard about a neighbor getting his sight back and going back to the village. So he starts booking it. Together, I forgot. We can. I'll tell her story. So this is Beatrice. She's an 82-year-old. Her son put her on a bicycle and pedaled her for 250 kilometers to get her there. It took him 6 days on a bicycle. He says because of the bad roads. We saw what that meant. Next page, 72, lives 250 kilometers. Again, he heard about it from a neighbor. He gets there late. And so then he has to go another total 370 kilometers to catch up to Tony because he missed him at the first site, so he follows him to the next place. So more and more stories like this. He's just, they just keep going. So at the end, he did like 650-something cataract surgeries, kind of improv. So the plane still hadn't gotten fixed, so they went to a third site. They spent 3 months on outreach, unplanned, before they got the flight out. So these are the people we're partnering with in their dedication to caring for the blind. This is dangerous work. This is insecure. If these guys get sick, and they get malaria, they get sick, there's nothing. Like you saw, they're not getting out. And so these guys are really doing some pretty incredible stuff. So we'll go back to the slideshow. So that's Jason and Tony, two of our partners that we're working with. So as you can imagine, the spiritual needs are immense. Many people, when they go blind in Africa, everyone assumes they've been cursed or they've done something to deserve this. So there's an incredible stigma put on the handicapped and the blind. Many people get abandoned by their families. And so when they come to these camps, they're carrying deep bitterness and resentment for how they've been treated. And so we really wanted to do a better job of caring for the spiritual needs of the patients. So this year we've been building up a support team because Tony is busy, right? It's hard for him to minister to all these needs of these patients. He's in the OR day and night. And so we've brought on Tony and Antoine. Sorry, I misspelled Antoine's name. Apologize to Antoine. That is how you spell Danny's name, believe it or not. So Tony and Antoine have joined our team that we're calling holistic specialists. And so they help with logistics, but they can also take the time to just sit down with each patient and hear their story and share the love of Jesus with them, share the gospel with them one-on-one, and as a group as we do these outreaches. And so this has been, the stories they're bringing to us and these outreaches are incredible. of how God's using them to bring healing and forgiveness in people's lives. So let's move on to kind of where I could see how fostering a missionary in I Love Africa can really bring so much light to the world together. So at Rio, in our training program, we basically have carte blanche to disciple and mentor the residents. Rwanda is a very safe, stable country. It is a great place to come and host visitors. It's a beautiful country. Kigali, has anyone been to Kigali? What do you guys think of Kigali? Yeah, it's a beautiful, wonderful place. We love living there. And so this is an ideal place for COS to send people and to come teach our residents. We can teach all sorts of stuff. So I think this is going to be a really wonderful way where we can partner, would be through the training of the residents in Kigali. As you've heard, some of the places we're working in maybe aren't ideal to visit. I can't even go to some of the places these guys go. Another thing that I Love Africa is doing is we're trying to identify trainees from high-need areas. It costs about $25,000 a year to train a resident. Half of that's tuition, half of that's living expense, because it's a big city in Kigali. So we estimate it's about $25,000 per year per resident to train them. The Rwandans are a little different because their salary is kept by the Ministry of Health. So we only have to do half for them. But we want to identify, as I Love Africa, 2 candidates per year, one outside of Rwanda and one inside of Rwanda, to be training specifically in discipling for high-need areas. And then secondly, for the in-Rwanda person to then be junior faculty with us at Rio, so we can build up the program. So scholarships is an area. There is, we're talking with some other people who might be able to come along and help in that area. For me too, Africa needs more access to simulation training, safe places to learn. We just hosted, you mentioned Orbis as a partner. We just hosted the Orbis Flying Eye Hospital. That's why I was late to this meeting, because I was hosting Orbis. And we hosted it for 2 weeks. The first week was all simulation training on the airplane, and the residents found it incredibly wonderful. And so, for example, this is Dr. Valence. Dr. Valence has graduated from Rio. She just is in the process of paying back her first year by being junior faculty, but we're going to release her early to go back to Eastern Congo, where she's going to join Dr. Jason as his partner. And so here she is working on a high-fidelity IC simulator. This was developed by VR Magic in Germany, bought by Hogstrite. Any residents ever play with this bad boy? Pretty amazing, right? So to have our residents be able to put in 100 hours on something like this before they get into a human eye would be really, really, really nice for my heart. Yeah. So I'd love to build out a sim center. And then a really big dream of mine, here in the U.S., educating doesn't make money. It takes a lot longer for me to sit in an OR all day and watch 4 resident cataracts get done compared to what I could do if I was doing the cataracts myself, right? So good training often doesn't happen in Africa because the trainers have to make a living, and so they can't spend very much time with the trainees because they got to get to work in their private practice to make a living, to feed their families. And so to have a great training center in Africa, I would, just like our centers here in America do, I would love to endow a couple key positions at Rio over the years, build up an endowment, just like we do here in the U.S. This would make these institutions much more financially stable, because paying the faculty is the biggest expense they have. So next would be equipping. I think that's a big area where COS can come alongside. So these are our I Love Africa partners. A few weeks ago, we all met in Uganda to hear how their work was going in Congo and Burundi, and we heard what their needs were. And we spent time praying for each other, hearing from God's word, and talking about how we can be more effective. And so each person in this room is at a different place, surgically where their clinic is, and has different needs. And so I'd love for us to work about kind of looking at the next most important thing for each of those partners and what we could do to help them advance their services and their capabilities. So I think that's another key area for us. So it's been an exciting 3 years in Kigali. God's really refreshed us. We have a wonderful church there. We're in a small group with Rwandans, kind of spanning the socioeconomic spectrum. I'm in a men's group with other kind of expats in Kigali of men that we pray together once a week. Sam and I have got Frisbee and basketball on the weekends. So yeah, we've really, really enjoyed living in Rwanda. So we're excited about this partnership and where God will take it, and we're really, really excited about what God's doing in eye care through Africans. This next generation, it's going to be really exciting to see what God does through them. So, ways you can kind of follow along with the story. Maybe you can just beam the QR code, because I think it's not embedded in the PowerPoint. So you can just, if you want to get our quarterly email updates, you can scan the QR code or see Jess or I. We've got prayer cards. Jessica's got our prayer cards. Let me just introduce our family if you didn't see them there. Jess, can you wave your hand? There's Jessica, my wife. Elise, our eldest, is right there. And then Sam, our youngest, is there. Did Micah make it back from whitewater rafting, Ben? All right, Micah. Welcome back, son. Glad you're alive. And so we got Micah there. So yeah, you can scan the QR code, get a prayer card, and also, I've never been on social media, but my amazing wife, I Love Africa, has Instagram and Facebook, I hear. So if you just look for I Love Africa, you could follow us on social media if you have such a crazy thing in your possession. So yeah, it's been a pleasure just sharing a bit of what's on our heart with you guys tonight. It's been a wonderful relationship over many years already, and we're really looking forward to what God's going to do through this partnership. So, yeah, I'll hand it back to you guys.